Let's look more at these bilateral ties with Peter Hakim. He's President Emeritus and Senior Fellow at the Inter-American Dialogue. Peter, welcome to our program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So the United States, Colombia's biggest trading partner, I'm going to give you some numbers, invested almost $2.5 billion with a B in Colombia. China invested $32 million. Big difference there. Is Iván Duque basically hoping to change those numbers with this visit?
Well, I presume that Iván Duque is following the lead of other presidents in Latin America, watching other countries attract rather large amounts of Chinese investment.
But Colombia has been very pro-U.S.
Well, that is exactly the issue. Colombia is the one country that really has to juggle the United States versus China, and particularly now. Country like Brazil or Chile, they have a long-standing relationship with China, and as much as the U.S. is wary of that and unhappy about that, it realizes that to make any major changes would be very costly. With Colombia, it's just starting, really, and there's a lot of opportunity given Colombia's agricultural production, its minerals, etc. I mean, Colombia has a lot of opportunities.
Are we going to see, Peter, any concrete agreements and proposals between Colombia and China in terms of trade and investment during this trip?
Well, I suspect that they will start.
The discussions, at least.
Yeah, and there may be one or two items that have already been negotiated that the president of Colombia and the Chinese premier can sign off on. But by and large, it's not going to be intense negotiations there. It's going to be sort of the formal, symbolic, celebratory. And I think it will be an important communication, if you like, for the, that Colombia is open to Chinese investment, and this will verify that.
You talked about Colombia having to juggle this relationship, on one side China, on the other side the United States. Talk about the geopolitical tug of war. I mean, as you mentioned, Colombia is surrounded by countries that get a lot of money and investment by China. The U.S. does not like that. In fact, it has called it a debt trap.
Right.
Does U.S. have valid concerns here?
Well, yeah, and the countries themselves have some valid concerns that China is lending too much money. It's really China that has a strategy for investment and trade, and the Latin American countries are the takers. They're not helping shape this. On the other hand, the fact that much of the Latin American trade is managed by private companies, it's not government to government, and in fact, much of what the Chinese are doing in Latin America is private companies as well. Yeah, this is a problem, but it's been a problem for countries receiving investment and countries offering investment for many years. China just happens to be a country that's growing. It's getting more important in Latin America. It's now the leading trade partner for South America, for Brazil, for Argentina, or very close in Argentina, Peru. And Colombia is trailing because of, I think, mostly Colombia has had more dependence on the U.S. It's received lots of aid.
Well, let me ask you about that. How much do you think President Trump's protectionist policies, if you will, how much has that impacted the economy of Colombia in terms of employment, in terms of the manufacturing sector?
I don't think a great deal. I mean, that the U.S. and Colombia have been rather close over the years. There's a bipartisan approach to Colombia, recognize the grave problems of the insurgency that are now supposedly over, but that now it's rebuilding rural areas, etc.
Let me move on to Beijing. My colleague
Sure.
Gas has a question for you as well. Gas, go ahead.
All right, Peter, hello from Beijing. I just want to expand on what you said about Colombia being open to China investment. We understand officials from Colombia have expressed interest in China's Belt and Road Initiative. How will this benefit both countries if a deal is made?
Well, almost all the countries in South America are exporters of primary goods, and China is a huge importer of primary goods. Almost all of them are suffering from a lack of sufficient infrastructure. It costs a lot of money to get their products from the mines or the fields to the ports, etc. And the fact is, China has been investing quite a bit in transportation and ports and railroads, etc. And this means quite a bit for Latin America if it's done with a degree of strategy and intelligence.
All right, thanks, Peter, for those insights.